Picture this for a moment. Russian soldiers, troops that were supposed to be among the most battle-hardened forces on Earth after 4 brutal years of grinding war, suddenly running through chaos and confusion. No clear orders, no reliable communications, no drone support overhead, no resupply routes, just the constant buzzing sound of Ukrainian FPV drones hunting them across isolated river islands and frozen gray zones. This is what battlefield collapse looks like. And right now, it is unfolding in real time for Vladimir Putin's army. This week, Ukraine carried out 2 of the most tactically brilliant counteroffensive operations since the start of the war. 2 different fronts, 2 completely different strategies, and both of them delivered devastating consequences for Russian forces. In the Dnipro River sector, Ukraine executed a remarkable 3-phase military operation that forced Russian troops off heavily fortified island strongholds without sending a single Ukrainian soldier into a direct assault across open water. At the same time, in Olexandrivka, Ukraine's elite air assault formations have been dismantling Russian positions along the borders of Yaksh, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Dnipropetrovsk regions, achieving the most significant territorial recapture since the major Ukrainian advances of summer 2023. But here's the critical point most headlines are missing. These are not just battlefield victories. They are strategic blows against Russia's entire 2026 war plan. Once you understand what Ukraine is setting up across these fronts, you begin to see just how dangerous the situation has become for Moscow. We're going to break down exactly how these operations unfolded, step by step, phase by phase, and why military analysts say they could reshape the trajectory of the war. But before we dive deeper, make sure you subscribe to BCC News and turn on notifications, because this war is evolving rapidly, and we bring you the most important developments in battlefield analysis as they happen. Let's begin with the Dnipro River front, where Ukraine just carried out something genuinely remarkable. For months, Russian forces had been occupying a chain of small islands scattered along the Dnipro River. These islands had become fortified staging grounds for Russian operations. Seized at enormous cost during earlier phases of the war, Russia paid a heavy price to take those islands. Crossing operations that burned through soldiers, equipment, and ammunition. But Moscow believed the strategic advantage was worth it. From those island positions, Russian drone teams could launch reconnaissance missions against Ukrainian troops holding the elevated western banks. They could bombard nearby Ukrainian positions. They could threaten supply routes and even target civilian areas in the city of Dnipro itself. From Russia's perspective, the islands offered a secure tactical advantage. They were isolated, surrounded by water, difficult to attack. Any Ukrainian attempt to retake them using a traditional assault would require sending troops across open river channels, where they would be exposed to Russian artillery, drones, and anti-armor weapons. Russian commanders believed Ukraine would never attempt such a costly operation, and they were right. Ukraine didn't attack the islands directly. Instead, Ukrainian planners designed a 3-phase asymmetric warfare strategy, so precise and methodical that military analysts are already calling it one of the most impressive operational maneuvers of the war, according to reports citing RFU News. The operation unfolded in 3 carefully executed stages. Phase 1 didn't target the islands themselves. Instead, Ukraine targeted everything that made the islands functional: supply chains, logistics networks, communications infrastructure, observation posts. Ukrainian military planners recognized something crucial. Russian soldiers on those islands depended entirely on supply lines and command links from the mainland. Cut those connections, and those island defenders would instantly become isolated, not defenders, prisoners. To execute this strategy, Ukraine deployed operators from its Venom drone unit. These drones were not standard strike drones. They had been modified to carry TM-62 anti-tank mines, powerful Soviet-era explosives that Ukrainian engineers have transformed into versatile drone-delivered munitions, as reported earlier by Forbes. The TM-62 has become a surprisingly adaptable weapon in Ukraine's arsenal. Originally designed to destroy tanks, the mine carries around 7.5 kilograms of high explosive. Ukrainian engineers upgraded the design into what they now call the TM-2025 variant, manufactured partly using 3D printing technology and fitted with electronic detonation systems. They even added stabilizing fins so the mines could glide toward targets when dropped from drones. The concept mirrors Ukraine's broader glide bomb strategy, scaled down for drone warfare. Using these weapons, Venom drone operators began systematically targeting Russian supply depots, command posts, and logistical hubs along the Dnipro front. Strike after strike, depot after depot, command post after command post. The effect was devastating. Russia's reconnaissance drone network was crippled. Command coordination collapsed. Russian units on the islands could no longer see what was happening around them. They were effectively blind. Phase 1 complete. But Ukraine still didn't rush in. Instead, Phase 2 began. This stage focused entirely on cutting Russian reinforcement routes across the Dnipro River. Ukrainian FPV drone operators began hunting every boat attempting to cross the river, every motorboat, every supply craft, every evacuation vessel. Russia had relied on those routes to deliver food, ammunition, water, and medical evacuation for wounded soldiers. Once Ukraine's drone hunters took control of the river corridor, that system collapsed. Wounded Russian soldiers could no longer be evacuated, reinforcements could no longer arrive, even emergency supply drops became impossible. Russia attempted to switch to drone-based resupply. But by that point, Phase 1 had already crippled their drone network. Operators were dead, equipment destroyed, infrastructure gone. Both the air corridor and the water corridor had been eliminated. According to RFU News, some desperate Russian soldiers even tried escaping by hiding in river reeds and wading through shallow areas, hoping to slip away unnoticed. Ukrainian drones found them anyway. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces were conducting parallel strikes in the occupied Oleshki area, targeting Russian command and observation posts that controlled the entire Dnipro front. One particularly important strike had already destroyed the Oleshki bridge, severing a vital logistical link. By the time Phase 3 began, Russian island forces were completely isolated. No supplies, no communications, no drone cover, no reinforcements. Only then did Ukraine begin direct attacks. Ukrainian drones and artillery began striking Russian hideouts and defensive positions. Groups of Russian soldiers attempting to regroup were quickly targeted. At that point, the choice facing them was simple: stay and die, or run. Most chose to run. And according to Ukrainian military spokesperson Vladislav Voloshin, Russian forces have already withdrawn from a significant number of those islands. Russian command reportedly concluded that holding those positions was no longer sustainable, and just like that, the staging grounds Russia had used for months to threaten the Dnipro region went silent. The impact of this development cannot be overstated. From a military standpoint, it removes a major launch platform Russia had been using for drone strikes and reconnaissance operations. From a civilian standpoint, it could save lives. Russia's drone attacks against Ukrainian civilians have been widely documented. Reports from Reuters and human rights organizations describe deliberate targeting of civilians in what analysts have described as aerial hunting operations. With those islands cleared, the people living in the region may finally have some relief. But the story doesn't stop there. Because while all of this was happening along the Dnipro River, Ukraine was simultaneously launching a powerful counteroffensive in Olexandrivka. And what is happening there may be even more strategically important. Ukraine's A2nd and 95th Air Assault Brigades have been spearheading attacks in the region. According to multiple reports, Ukrainian forces have recaptured around 200 square kilometers of territory in just 5 days. To put that in perspective, that is roughly the same amount of territory Russia managed to gain during the entire month of December 2025. Ukraine erased it in less than a week, and the advances continued. According to Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief Olexandr Syrsky, Ukrainian forces have restored control over more than 285 square kilometers in a single month along that axis. The total reclaimed territory since early 2026 now exceeds 400 square kilometers. The Institute for the Study of War noted something historic about these gains. For the first time since the 2023 counteroffensive, Ukraine has recorded net positive territorial gains for multiple consecutive weeks. In simple terms, Ukraine is now taking more ground than it is losing. That is a significant shift. One major factor behind this sudden momentum was the Starlink shutdown affecting Russian forces. After Ukraine implemented a whitelist verification system, unregistered terminals used by Russian troops suddenly stopped working. Russian units had relied heavily on these terminals for communications and drone coordination. When the shutdown occurred, entire command networks collapsed. Russian assault operations stalled almost immediately. Without communications, units could not coordinate attacks or call for support. This gave Ukraine a temporary but powerful battlefield advantage. Ukrainian assault units moved forward quickly. The gray zones were cleared. Russian lines were pushed back. But the deeper significance lies in what this means for Russia's larger strategy. According to multiple analysts, Russia has been preparing a major spring-summer 2026 offensive. Reports suggest Moscow had assembled over 100,000 troops out for that operation. The targets were likely the heavily fortified Ukrainian cities, forming what analysts call the POW fortress belt in Donetsk. Ukraine's recent counterattacks are now forcing Russia to commit reserves earlier than planned. Every Russian soldier lost now is one fewer available for that summer offensive. Every kilometer Ukraine retakes now becomes another fortified defensive line Russia must fight through later. In other words, Ukraine is not just winning territory, it is bleeding Russia's strategic reserves before the offensive even begins. Russian losses remain staggering. Ukrainian officials estimate Russian forces are losing more than 1,000 personnel per day on average. At that rate, Russia could lose tens of thousands of troops before the summer campaign even begins. The contrast between the two sides is striking. Russia relies on mass and overwhelming firepower. Ukraine relies on intelligence, precision, and multi-phase operations designed to exploit weaknesses. The Dnipro River operation perfectly demonstrates that philosophy. 3 phases, no frontal assault, minimal Ukrainian casualties, maximum Russian collapse. Ukraine hasn't won the war, not yet, but it is outthinking and outfighting an enemy that still outnumbers it 3-1, and that is reshaping the battlefield. We will continue watching these developments closely here on Varsovius BCC News, bringing you the latest updates on the Ukraine war, global conflicts, and major geopolitical shifts shaping the world. Make sure you subscribe to BCC News, turn on notifications, and stay informed so you never miss the next major development. And if this analysis helped you understand what is really happening on the battlefield, share this video so more people can see the full picture. Thanks for watching.